Ji, Assalamualaikum students. This is a question which is not from any past paper. I created this question myself. The background of creating this question, or the rationale behind creating this question, was that I have observed that students are more comfortable answering questions about the problems of trade deficit and budget deficit, but they are less comfortable when they are asked to discuss the problems of a trade surplus and a budget surplus. So that was the idea behind this question. So let me briefly give you an insight of a possible answer for this question. A trade surplus arises when exports of goods exceed imports of goods. The mention of goods is very important. The definition will not be complete if you do not mention this. So trade surplus arises when exports of goods exceed imports of goods, and a rising trade surplus means exports of goods rise faster than imports of goods. Again, if you write exports of goods rise, and that means trade surplus will rise, that will not be incorrect. That will not be correct, because an increase in export may not always lead to an increase in trade surplus, as in a case where exports rise by, let's say, 10% and imports of goods rise by 15%, the trade surplus will shrink. Trade surplus will rise only when exports of goods rise faster than imports of goods. So when exports of goods rise faster than imports of goods, we can conclude that net exports are rising. And net exports are a component of aggregate demand. Therefore, aggregate demand will rise and will shift to the right. This will lead to higher real GDP, and to produce that higher real GDP, more workers will be hired, and that will reduce the level of unemployment in the country. However, it is true only for economies which have excess capacity. A trade surplus could be inflationary for economies which are operating at or above full employment, and economies which have a steeper AS curve. The increase in net exports and the increase in AD in such economies may trigger demand pull inflation. Trade surplus may also benefit the country, as they will be able to accumulate more reserves of foreign currencies, and they'll be able to repay, they'll be either able to build their reserves, or they'll be able to repay the external loans they have taken. And this will also lead to a stronger exchange rate, and that may lead to cheaper imports in the long run. So these are some of the benefits and drawbacks of trade surplus. It raises GDP, it raises employment, it builds foreign reserves, it helps repay external loans. However, it may be inflationary, and the amount of goods available for domestic consumers will shrink, as most of the goods are being exported. Now we move to budget surplus. Budget surplus arises when revenues of government through taxes exceed government expenditures. Since government expenditures are a component of AD, and taxes reduce AD, whereas government spending raises AD, an increase in budget surplus, that is when taxes rise faster than government spending, that means AD falls. And a budget surplus will mean, an increase in budget surplus will mean AD will shift to the left, and GDP will fall, and employment will also decrease, as lesser workers will be required to produce smaller output. This will create a trigger recession. However, a budget surplus will help stabilize the price level and will help control inflation. Budget surplus will also lead to another problem, that the government may be reducing its spending on infrastructure, on education and training, and that may shift aggregate supply and potential to produce of the economy to the left, and the production possibility curve and AS curve may shift to the left. High taxes, that could be a reason of budget surplus, may also take away the incentive to work, and that may also shrink the production capacity. So budget surplus is beneficial as it helps control inflation, but it triggers recession, it takes away incentive to work, and it may reduce production capacity. So we have given both advantages as well as the disadvantages of increase in trade surplus. Now, what should be government concerned about a rising trade surplus, or it should be concerned more about a rise in budget surplus? It depends upon the situation of the economy. If the economy has excess capacity and unemployed resources, an increase in trade surplus will be more welcome, whereas an increase in budget surplus will be quite a disadvantage, because increase in budget surplus will uh, actually intensify the problem of unemployment. So a trade surplus is more welcome and less worrying when there is excess capacity. However, a trade surplus is more worrying when there is inflation. Similarly, a budget surplus is more suitable and more appropriate for an economy which has inflation, and it is less suitable for an economy which has excess capacity. Similarly, we need to look at which type of goods we are exporting. If we are exporting raw materials and machinery, in that case, a trade surplus may not be that ideal. But if we are exporting value added goods and goods which are giving us good export revenue and not affecting the availability of goods for the domestic consumers, a trade surplus increase is welcome. So that is my tip for this answer.